to Noob-Splaining. My name is Wolf. If this is your first time here, this is where I explain the gloriously over-the-top world of Warhammer 40,000 that nerds like me love so much. So hit that subscribe button, grab a drink, settle in, and prepare for a Noob-Splaining session. And so everybody, welcome to this week's video. My apologies on the delay compared to my usual release time, but unfortunately things are happening beyond my control. So, just as a reminder then, in this series of videos, which is becoming apparent, it's basically a combat patrol review, which is a good thing, as combat patrols are a great way to start the game, and that's what my videos are all about, to get you started, or for somebody you know to get started. So the format for this series is a brief reminder of each faction's lore, a look at what's in the combat patrol box, which is basically the starter box for each faction, and what the units do or should be doing on the tabletop. Along with that, we'll take a quick look at the army's unique rules, what models I think you should also think about adding, and finally, a quick rundown of how the combat patrol plays, and how the faction in general can play. This week, we're going to be looking at the current big bad of the setting, the great devourer hive mind, that is the Tyranids. So, as always, we're going to start with a brief recap of the Tyranids lore. Now, if you want something more in-depth, check out my previous video on the faction. However, if you want to go really in-depth, then I suggest you would look up Baltimore, Sandman of Terror, or Warhammer for the more advanced stuff. But for now, I'm going to keep it to the basics over here. The Tyranids, a collection of units that are all teeth, claws, chitinous armour, bioweapons, and every single one of them is pure nightmare fuel. Although being a mainstay in 40k since 2nd edition, which to many was when 40k really started. However, in terms of in-universe timelines, they are one of the youngest factions in the galaxy when compared to factions like the Eldari, Orcs and Necrons. The Tyranids themselves came from outside the galaxy in a massive hive fleet named Behemoth. The first planet they encountered was an oceanic world called Tyran, which had a small Mechanicus outpost on it, and is how they got their name. The Tyranids immediately ate every piece of biological life on the planet. The Imperium being the big, clumsy, slow government, it is naturally didn't fucking notice this. It was, however, just a single planet out of millions. So with the boost in biomatter, the fleet grew and proceeded to eat everything on several more planets before someone finally fucking noticed something was wrong. By this point, the Hive Fleet was fucking massive, and nearly destroyed the Ultra Smurfs, I mean the Ultramarines. Personally, I think the Tyranids should have put a harder shift in, and finished them off, but you know. Now, with the Hive Fleet shattered, its surviving ships fucked off all across the galaxy to try and prey on weak, unprotected worlds in an effort to rebuild its forces. Then the Tyranids showed back up, this time in the form of Hive Fleet Kraken, and this time instead of one massive fleet, they splintered into several smaller fleets, and fucked up many Space Marine chapters to the point of near extinction, including the Lamenters. But ever since the Badab War, this is just another fucking Tuesday for the Lamenters. I really should do a video on the Badab War, but frankly I don't think I could do a better job than Arbiter Ian, so until I do, go watch his video if you want to know more about the Badab War. Now next we have Hive Fleet Leviathan, and that nearly destroyed Baal, the home planet of the Space Marines chapter of the Blood Angels. Again, would have been no major loss in my eyes, and I think the Tyranids should have put in a harder shift. After this fleet was mostly destroyed, it started heading towards Holy Terror, and so the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Rabute Gilliman, has dispatched the Ultramarines and pretty much every other chapter he can lay his hands on to stop them. The silly thing about this is the Ultramarines are getting their asses kicked again and again. It's like they've never faced Tyranids before. An argument can be made that these are all new Marines, but frankly that's just a load of bollocks, as the Ultramarines are famed for taking real combat experiences and using them to make new plans that are very effective, and the fact that the Tyranids are just tearing through them makes them look like fucking idiots, instead of the most tactical strategic planners ever. I digress. The Tyranids are not individual creatures, but one massive hive mind. But due to so many hive fleets being shattered, it is speculated there now be several hive minds that may or may not be working in tandem with the others. Anyway, lore recap done, let's have a look at the combat patrol box. Now this is one of those boxes where you got a lot of models, which remember indicates that there are very cheap point-wise, which means they're generally a bit shit compared to other factions. But then they more than make up with it in numbers, so in theory it should all balance out. In this particular box you get the following: 1 Winged Tyranid Prime, who is your army leader, 1 Psychophage, 3 Von Ryan's Leapers, 5 Barb Gaunts, 20 termagants, and 2 Ripper Swarms. So 32 models in total there. So a lot of models to start with, and like all Combat Patrol, it's all pushed to fit. The downside to this compared to get them individually is you don't get any customization options, so I'll take that into account when talking about the units. Starting with our leader, the Winged Prime, it is a melee only unit, but with its keyword ability of fly and a massive 12-inch move, it should be in combat no later than turn 2. Not the toughest creature in the Tyranids character spawn pool, but with its 6 attacks, strength 6 damage, you want to be using this thing on weak characters and small units like 5 Space Marines. It's meant to be zipping around the battlefield, preying on weaker units. The Psychophage. Now this is more like it. This is the beast of your army, with a massive toughness of 9, 10 wounds and a 3+ save, and with both a ranged and a melee attack. This beast should be pointed at your enemy's toughest characters or units and let off the leash to do its thing. Its thing being murder the shit out of everyone that isn't a Tyranid. Plus, if a unit it's attacking in melee is damaged, it gets a +1 to its hit roll, and if that unit is also below half damage, it gets +1 to its wound roll as well. It could probably deal with most Dreadnought class units, or light tanks, or APCs like the Rhino if needed. It is also very, very good at killing Psykers in melee, but I think there is only 1 or maybe 2 Combat Patrol boxes that include a Psyker. Still handy to have when facing bigger armies, because the first thing most people go out and do is buy themselves a Space Wizard. The Von Ryan Leapers. Now if you're experienced in 40k, then these things are basically a slightly weaker version of Lictors, but they get to operate in units, whereas the Lictor is always solo. Again, this is a melee only unit, but with several stealth abilities, meaning they can set up pretty much anywhere on the battlefield, and the enemy can only target them if they're within 12 inches of range. Between the 3 of them, they get a massive 18 attacks at strength 5, so are definitely meant to take down large weak squads like Orc Boys or Imperial Guards, or smaller heavy armoured squads like 5 to 10 Space Marines or even 5 Terminators. Basically, these guys are your hunters, and they need to hit the big things hard and then move on. Next we have the Barb GS. Now this is the first truly dedicated range unit in the box, and designed to smash and suppress your opponent's infantry squads. If your opponent has a powerful melee infantry squad, use these annoying bastards to slow them down, as 1 unit per turn that sustains a hit from them loses 2 from its move, and a further 2 from any advance or charge moves it tries to make. If the opponent has no melee units, then select the infantry unit with the most models in it and pummel the fuck out of it. The Termagants. At the start of the game, you can select to deploy them in a squad of 20 or 2 squads of 10. 2 squads means you can hold 2 strategic locations, but then there is also safety in numbers. It's pretty much a personal preference thing, and also how the battlefield looks and your opponent army. You will learn over time whether you want to split them or keep them in a big mass mob. But the more you play, the more you'll figure things like this out yourself. There is no hard and fast rules. It's one of those where you look at the battlefield and have to make an instant decision. Now again, these guys are pretty much a dedicated range unit, but only with a range of 18, so they need to get into close range. However, they are not very tough, so expect quite a few of them to get shot up before they're in range to start doing any real damage. These guys are more a meat shield for your Barb GS than a key unit. And finally, your Ripper Swarms. Again, this is a melee unit. They do have some range, but only 6 inches, you might as well forget about it. But if the chance arises, you might as well throw some dice if you can. Now, it is however the melee for these little buggers though. Although they can dish out a massive 6 attacks each, those attacks are weak as fuck, and I've seen toddlers punch harder, and also so are the models themselves. So use them to tie up really weak ship units in melee combat, as these little annoying shits can't even hold a strategic object. Quite frankly, they are one of the worst units in the whole game. Now, onto the army special rule, the Shadow in the Warp. Once per game, during either player's command phase, you can use the Shadow in the Warp ability to make every enemy unit take a battle shock test. Now, quality armies like Space Marines, Custodians and Eldari rarely fail them, but swarm armies like Orcs and Imperial Guard seem to queue up just to fail. So, you need to use your Leapers and the Barb GS to pummel 1 or more units to below half strength so they take a battle shock test. Now this is where the dirty trick comes in. Wait until the enemy's command phase, until they have just done any battle shock tests. If they pass, then use this ability to make the entire army take a test again. You see, it says use it in the command phase, it doesn't say when. So wait until the enemy's key units have passed their battle shock, and then make them do another fucker. It's not the best ability, I will admit, But played right and with some luck, you can really fuck up your opponent's battle plans, as battle-shocked units pretty much can't move, or if they do, they're losing on average a third of their models. So, suppress with the Barb gaunts, capture points with the other units, while the enemy's suppressed, cause enough damage to battle shock them, then when they come out of battle shock, you just put them straight back in battle shock again. Overall, a lot of nice models, as always from Games Workshop, but from a battlefield point of view, frankly I think the selection sucks. The Tyranids are best at home charging across the battlefield and tearing the enemy limb from limb using massed Hormagaunts, who are the melee version of Termagants, or better still, pure strain Genestealers that are just fucking nightmare fuel with their forearms and claws capable of ripping Terminators apart. Don't fuck around with the Genestealers either, go for 2 to 3 squads of 10. The other thing Tyranids are good at producing is big nasty creatures, so adding some Carnifexes, and maybe some Screamer Killers too, as you can pretty much handle most things the enemy can throw at you then. As much as I love the combat patrol boxes, if you're just going to collect and paint, go for it for this one. If however you are going to start playing, I would say you'll be far better off making your own 500 point army to begin with. For that I would suggest a Broodlord Commander with 10 Genestealers, 5 Barb Gaunts and a Screamer Killer, totaling 495 points. From there you can add on what you need, be it big nasty creatures that are all teeth and claws like Carnifexes, fast moving creatures that are all teeth and claws like the Leapers, or a massive swarm of creatures that are all teeth and claws like Hormagaunts. Although the Tyranids do have quite a bit of ranged units, most of them are short range like the Sisters of Battle. Unlike the Sisters of Battle though, the Tyranids are best in melee. However, overall I would give this combat patrol box a 2 out of 10. If anything, it's one of those things I would pick up just for the collection, and chances are I think it would just sit in my pile of shame for a very, very long time. But that being said, the Tyranids can be a very, very good army. It's just this combat patrol box doesn't do them justice. Thanks for listening. And there we have it. That brings us to the end of this video. If you laughed or learnt anything, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and if you are already subscribed, then don't forget to share this video with somebody who could do with some noob-splaining in their life. Also, leave a comment on your favourite part. I do try and interact with every comment. But if you made it this far, thank you, and I'll see you next time.